Alas, Diana, you literal goddess. How quickly the decades pass for we mere mortals. Do you remember when, as recent as 2017, you were neither a Democrat nor Republican, but simply Wonder Woman, a timeless icon of strength and light, fighting for and inspiring all without regard to who they voted for? How quickly things change? I wonder. Maybe it really is 1984. But who cares what I think?
Good show.
Who cares what I think?
Moonjumper here with my first 2021 episode of Who Cares What I Think, and in this case, I guess the question is, who cares what I think of the current state of DC? Well, I care because between DC and Marvel, and I love both, I've never understood this forced tribalism that you must choose between DC or Marvel. You must choose between Star Trek or Star Wars. Why? Can't I enjoy both? And can't I have a favorite without hating the other? Because yeah, I love both, but okay, emotionally, even when Marvel as of late does a far better job of creating a cohesive universe, particularly on the film and television side of it, there's no denying that. Although I should point out that the MCU of today is merely following in the footsteps of the DCAU from the 90s and early 2000s, but that was over 20 years ago, and DC/Warner Brothers is most definitely playing catch up with Marvel/Disney and having a rather rough go of it. But in terms of which are my favorite characters on a deeper emotional level, I tend to lean more towards the characters of DC, especially the Holy Trinity, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. Probably because these were the first three superhero characters I was ever exposed to on television from the time I was a toddler onwards. Adam West as Batman, George Reeves in The Adventures of Superman, and the beautiful Linda Carter as Wonder Woman. And of course, the first superhero team-up I ever knew as a little boy wasn't the Avengers, it was the animated Superfriends, aka the Justice League. Thus, most of the comics I bought off those little spinning racks, back when there were comic books little boys could actually read, they tended to be DC Comics. At the same time, I'd also read Spider-Man and the Hulk because these were Marvel characters I knew and loved from 1970s TV. And that, my friends, illustrates what will be a key point of this video and series of videos in which I will be discussing DC and Warner Brothers vis-a-vis the now defunct DC Universe streaming service, which has now in effect been folded into and replaced by the insanely more expensive HBO Max, which is now in turn premiering first run Wonder Woman 1984, further adding to the devastation of struggling theaters. Decades ago, the stewards of entertainment, be it mainstream or carefully targeted, built their entire business and marketing models on studying and understanding demographics. Translation, the old adage, know your audience. And they were quite skilled at finding creative ways to expand their fan bases rather than going out of their way to alienate the fans they already have. The goal was addition, not subtraction. They understood that Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman could be equally inspiring to the limitless imaginations of a child as they were to a hardened American GI fighting in the trenches of World War II. And they understood that if a young child grows up loving these characters, chances are so will their children and their children's children. And love these characters I did, both DC and Marvel, because I was exposed to them so early. It never occurred to 8-year-old me that I had to take a tribal position of one against the other. But then tribalism seems to rule the world we live in today, and unfortunately it's something which even transcends politics and social awareness. It even comes down to, as I was just alluding, things like age demographic. You're too old, you're too young, I want nothing to do with you. Even in the case of a mainstream legacy franchise like DC. I'm not talking about a niche art house film, but a multi-billion-dollar entertainment mainstay popular with the masses and kids from 1 to 92 for decades upon decades, but in which the current showrunners have themselves become so tribalistic, thus isolated and disconnected from their audiences, they're willing to cancel half or more of their own fan base if they're even aware of who their fan base is. I hadn't even watched Wonder Woman 1984 at the time I began writing this, which was intended to be a post-mortem analysis of what I believe may have gone wrong with DC Universe, the former superhero streaming service from Warner Brothers you will no longer find on your Roku or any other streaming device, because as a catered streaming service, DC Universe is officially deceased. It is gone, which I am sad about. I was a subscriber, and the idea of a reasonably priced service, I'm looking at you HBO Max, a reasonably priced service which combines a large catalog of DC movies and television series going back decades and decades, new original series, and a comprehensive online comic book collection going back 80 plus years, all included, to me seemed like a stroke of genius on the part of Warner Brothers, aka WarnerMedia, aka AT&T, which is the parent company of DC, and oh, by the way, HBO and HBO Max, which I'll get to. But the concept of DC Universe to me was brilliant and exciting, and yet it failed, and failed miserably. Nobody signed up for it. I guess I was one of the few. And for the most part, I loved it, but right away I recognized that it had a major, possibly fatal design flaw.
That really hurt you!
Holy shit. He just became like the least employable person on earth.
Exactly. I got the worst. If he wants to with me, I will right back.
Namely, it was a superhero channel which was so R-rated your kids couldn't watch it. Now folks, that's not me being a prude. Obviously I wasn't personally offended by it, or I would have canceled my subscription. And there's plenty of room for mature titles. For crying out loud, the Walt Disney Company produced Marvel's Jessica Jones for Netflix, which is an excellent series. There is room for that, but you gotta be smart about it. Have some variety. I'm smart enough to know that the reason I am a fan of DC as a middle-aged guy in my 40s is because I've been a fan of DC since I was a very little boy. So it doesn't make any sense to launch a DC-only superhero channel in which every single original series produced by that channel is rated TVMA. With the sole exception, to be fair, of Young Justice, but it seems to me that pretty well stayed under the radar. I didn't see a lot of promotion for it. Were kids and parents even aware of it? What they were aware of was Robin and the Teen Titans proudly announcing "F*** Batman," and Kaylee Kuko giddy about a rather hard R version of Harley Quinn, because that's all DC wanted to emphasize.
The kids love it.
And I don't even really count Stargirl. It was a little higher profile, but by the time it finally premiered, DC Universe was already in the process of shutting down, and it went straight to the CW where anyone can watch it for free. Something family friendly like Stargirl should have been right out of the gate, while Titans should have been at most TV-14 if the goal was to entice and not discourage families and children from signing up. But clearly family friendly was not the image DC Universe wished to telegraph to its potential customers. For an entertainment genre which used to cater specifically to kids and families as its core audience, but oh no, that is now considered beneath the dignity of the current showrunners. We're all about prestige now.
Fuck Batman.
Yeah, fuck Batman, moms and dads. Sign up now. Just make sure your kids are out of the room. The Teen Titans are now adults only, because we at DC believe in a core value. Kids are lame.
Holy ego!
Warner Brothers and Hollywood in general, they've completely lost touch with their fan base, either by ignorance or obstinance, and it all relates back to living and working in an echo chamber, to where you either don't know or understand your audience or outright despise half or more of your audience, sometimes to the point that your sense of artistic integrity dictates that you'd rather go broke than accept their money. Hey, now that's your choice, that's your right, but that doesn't change the reality that it is both hurtful to fans and your bottom line. I'll get more into the nitty-gritty of DC Universe in the follow-up video, which I intended to do here, but I changed my mind because during all the heartbreaking chaos of watching my nation spiral into tribal violence on live television January 6th, after months of tribal violence burning down our cities, where civilians and police officers alike are being killed over matters of who people voted for, the likes of which happen only in third world countries, except it's happening here in the United States. I was so disgusted and demoralized I had to turn the TV off, get in my car, and find a movie theater that wasn't out of business, and just escape tribal politics for 2 hours. 2 hours was all I asked. I guess my big mistake was I don't like to be spoiled. I go out of my way not to be spoiled. I don't read or watch reviews until after I've seen the movie. I even try to avoid plot summaries. I want to go in fresh, without influence, and let the movie sell itself. Go watch my review of Tenet, a movie I enjoyed. When I went to see Tenet, as far as I knew, it was just a sci-fi action flick. I didn't even know it was going to have anything to do with time manipulation. I went in fresh, seeking pure fantasy escape. Just chill for 2 hours in a completely empty theater, of course, in 2021. I figured I can't go wrong with Wonder Woman, a DC Comics character who is almost universally beloved by all. Left, right, red state, blue state, been a part of American cultural mythology for 80 years, practically the definition of mass mainstream appeal. Especially after her big 2017 solo movie, which was massively successful and broadly appealing to everyone. It was a great film. People loved it. Didn't matter if they were Republican or Democrat, and director Patty Jenkins didn't seem to care if we were a Republican or Democrat, or neither. She just wanted us to love her film, and we did, because she made a great film. Not to mention, Gal Gadot is a treasure. I adore her. She really is the perfect Wonder Woman, and I'm a giddy Linda Carter fan, so that says a lot. And yet, 3 years later, during one of the most contentious election years of our lifetime, to say nothing of the health crisis, where no movie is making a profit and movie theaters are out of business, somehow Ms. Jenkins and the folks at Warner Brothers thought it would be a good idea to take all that goodwill they had earned with the first film and spend $200 million on a sequel, Wonder Woman 1984, hoping to make back $1 billion in profit by going out of their way to alienate half or more of their paying audience with not just an anti-Trump movie. I mean, last 4 years we've pretty well come to expect that, but goes even a step further in its blatant partisanship by portraying someone as widely beloved as Ronald Reagan in an inept and disparaging light. Seriously, even mainstream liberals tend to have a soft spot for Ronald Reagan, but Warner Brothers thought this was a good idea. Now, don't misunderstand. Freedom of speech, freedom of expression. If you're one of about 15 people familiar with my videos, then you know I'm a huge proponent of free speech, no matter how annoying that speech may be, most certainly including mine. Who cares what I think? Ms. Jenkins and the folks at Warner Brothers have every constitutional right to make any statement they wish, and if they are bold enough to spend $200 million to do it, hey, that's on them, and I'll stand up for their right to do so. Although I'd be a little curious if their stockholders would. I don't know, maybe they would. All I'm saying is they shouldn't be surprised, shocked, or stunned when half or more of their audience doesn't come back for Wonder Woman 3, or more immediately, cancels their subscriptions to the way overpriced HBO Max, because people take it personally. Like it or not, Warner Brothers, roughly half the US population who voted for Donald Trump, while the other half voted for Joe Biden, who had just enough advantage to eke out a win. But still, roughly 50-50 or 51-49, but half and half, split not just among voters, but likewise among the audience, half of whom are now feeling singled out by the movie they paid precious money and rather hard times to see. But if you work and live in the echo chamber that is Hollywood, chances are you've never met a Republican. You think that 45 to 50% of the mainstream public is some tiny fringe element. But forget 50-50. In Hollywood, apparently you've completely forgotten that in 1984, the very year this movie takes place, literally 49 out of 50 states sans Minnesota voted to re-elect Ronald Reagan. Now wrap your head around that. 49 out of 50 states, hands down the most popular president of my lifetime, and an enormous portion of the people who voted for Reagan and or lived during the Reagan years, which were good times. I was there. The 80s were awesome. We're still around. We're not dead. I remember Linda Carter. And dude, I'm not even that old. I'm Gen X for crying out loud. We still love Reagan, and we still love Wonder Woman and Superman and Batman. Just as I'm sure a majority of the tens of millions of Americans who voted for Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and Bill Clinton all love Wonder Woman and Superman and Batman and Aquaman and Green Lantern. These characters are not partisan. They are iconic. Now, it's important to make a distinction here between the terms political and partisan. For 80 plus years, these characters have of course faced countless political and social issues of the day. Their creators, most of them, were true liberals in the classic sense. Patriots who believed that equality, truth, and justice were the American way. For crying out loud, many of these characters came to national prominence fighting actual, literal Nazis, and by that I do not mean your local college Republicans. I'm talking about Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman taking on the actual Third Reich and their allies in Imperial Japan and Fascist Italy during World War II. If they were partisan in any way, it was on a geopolitical scale in which Americans were clearly the good guys. In the post-war years, superheroes stood on the side of equality between men and women, black and white, and more recently, gay and straight. In the 70s on Saturday mornings, the Superfriends taught numerous moral lessons to children such as pollution is not a good thing, racism is not a good thing. And while yes, you can say that these are important moral and political issues, for the vast majority of Americans, no matter how the tribal fringes try to frame it, these are not partisan issues. These are American ideals almost all of us agree with regardless of party, which is why traditionally, especially on the film and television side of the franchise, which will tend to have and rely on wider, more general mainstream audiences than even the print side. Print side, sure, you're sure to find exceptions to the rule from individual writers. Frank Miller comes immediately to mind. Brilliant creator, but not exactly subtle. His Dark Knight Returns kind of help kick off the darker, coppery beginnings of the more militant modern age, where Batman's insane and Superman's a dick. But in the 80s, even that was its own fringy sub-universe, not the mainstream continuity Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman we all know, love, and admire. My sense is that the iconic, positive, inspiring versions of these characters which were established in the Golden, Silver, and Bronze Ages remain, for the most part, the iconic versions most of the general public still thinks of when they want to go see a superhero movie.
We're in the process right now of always looking to see what direction is embraced greatest by pop culture. And what we want to do is grow on that so that we're playing to an interpretation of command that can play to the widest audience possible.
Years past, even just prior to 4 years ago, you would not expect to see any of these iconic characters openly advocate for or against real-life U.S. presidential candidates. They weren't like today's Arrowverse Supergirl and friends openly declaring which political party they belong to by name, thus implying that all the good guys are in one political party and all the bad guys are in the other. And that's when I feel you start to cross a line. Again, free speech, you have the right to make whatever statement you wish, but you are in essence telling at least one half of your paying audience you suck.
To the why is just wondering is possible.
This superhero you have loved and admired since you were 6 years old, he or she no longer represents you. He or she no longer approves of you. Please take your money elsewhere and don't come back. Or to the folks who like to read up on movies before they go see them, don't come in the first place. You're not welcome. Even if that's not your actual conscious intention, that is the message you are sending. Just look what happened with Birds of Prey from DC Warner Brothers. What I actually thought was an okay film, not particularly good, but I've seen far worse, and it didn't diminish my love for Harley Quinn. Margot Robbie is great even when the movie is terrible, but the perception among the general public, one that I'm not entirely sure is fair or deserved. Again, I try my darndest to avoid media buzz surrounding films and not go in pre-biased. I want the movie to succeed or fail on its own merits, not based on what other people are saying about it, not based on what the filmmakers are saying about it. Don't tell me how great it is, show me. The perception among the general public seemed to be that this was going to be not just a feminist film, it's certainly that, but specifically an anti-male film. There's a distinction there. That men were not going to be welcomed in the audience. Again, I'm not convinced that's entirely fair. I have Googled all over the internet trying to find articles, any article, where Kathy Yan is telling men to go F themselves. Don't come see my movie. Press releases from Warner Brothers shaking their fist at the evil patriarchy. If those articles ever existed, I can't find them. Patty Jenkins openly admits that her version of Maxwell Lord was based on Donald Trump, but I'm not finding those kind of articles quoting Kathy Yan. All I can find are third-party tribalists praising the film for hating men or bashing the film for hating men. And I watched it, and I think both those assessments are rather tribally shallow. It really does nothing more than follow the general character arc for Harley Quinn established 20 plus years ago on Batman the Animated Series, which originated the character. Harley began her arc in a clearly abusive relationship with the Joker, to whom she was emotionally dependent before she finally had enough and dumped him, deciding to partner up with Poison Ivy. In this version, it was the Birds of Prey, but Harley Quinn dumping the Joker and going solo badass on her own, this is not new information. Every guy who loves Batman the Animated Series and or reads Harley Quinn comics, of which there are many, already knew this. 2 decades ago, I rooted for Harley when she finally dumped the Joker, not because he represents the patriarchy, but because he's a dick. He's evil, whereas she's not entirely evil. You neither have to be female nor vote a certain way to understand that. And yet, unfortunately for the film, fair or not, the public perception seemed to be that men were not welcomed in the audience, which is bad news for Warner Brothers' bottom line, because like it or not, who loves Harley Quinn probably more than anybody? Men! She's hot, okay? Are we still allowed to say that? Add to that an R rating for a character who originated on a kids' TV show. So now you've really narrowed your audience. Adult women only who can't bring their kids. Sound familiar, DC Universe? You paying attention, HBO Max? Again, I'm not a prude, I'm not a tribalist canceling anyone's free expression. All I'm saying is, do the math. It doesn't square. Just because over a period of 4 years, WarnerMedia's primary news division, CNN, has managed to carve out a relatively successful niche as a brazenly anti-Trump network, that's different. That's cable. These networks, CNN, Fox, I think it's somewhat unfortunate, but they've managed to build their business models on attracting tribal echo chambers to their individual channels. I'm not sure that works so well applying that model to a universally beloved non-partisan character like Wonder Woman and spending $200 million during such a hyper-polarized election year on what amounts to a 2-hour partisan presidential campaign ad. Don Lemon can say whatever he wants. It doesn't cost WarnerMedia $200 million for him to say it. That's not what I went to the movies for. I doubt most Democrats were expecting that from a Wonder Woman movie. Wonder Woman has always been a heroine for everybody. meant for the masses, from die-hard fans to just the casual moviegoer who probably would love nothing more than to just have 2 hours of fantasy escape, where for 2 hours someone isn't on their TV screaming in their face about Donald Trump, even if they crawled over glass to vote against the guy. Biden voters have had enough too. We all have. We're all at our wits' end, having just lived through one of the worst years in recent memory, all of us left, right, and in the middle, and still unsure of the road ahead. So rather than fan the flames, Warner Brothers, why not help us lower the temperature? And in the case of Wonder Woman 84, that could have been such an easy fix. Just let Maxwell Lord be Maxwell Lord from the comics. He's an amazing villain in his own right, so why sell him short? That's a disservice to that character. If you have Maxwell Lord, you certainly don't need Trump. And you have the ingredients for a pretty good movie. Kristen Wiig did a fine job as Cheetah. In fact, you could have just as easily had her as the sole villain. Why sell her short? Chris Pine, fantastic. His chemistry with Gal Gadot, beautiful to behold, and once again, Gal Gadot was a pure jewel who still managed to shine despite all the distraction of the unnecessary, angry partisanship. We all have our biases, and we all have a right to disagree. That's as American as, well, the Stars and Stripes. That said, it shouldn't matter if you're a liberal, conservative, young, old, man, woman, or child. Wonder Woman has for decades been an inspiring icon around whom we can all unify. I would encourage the creative forces behind the scenes at Warner Brothers, DC, and now HBO Max to not lose sight of that, because I care about DC. Which is why, in parts 2 and 3, we'll take a deeper dive into the unfortunate failure of DC Universe, what part the launch of HBO Max may or may not have played in its demise, and whether or not the former programming of DC Universe, both new and classic, ever had the potential to attract a large enough audience to survive, even succeed, as a specialized streaming service. I can't give you any definitive answers. I have no unnamed inside sources familiar with Batman's thinking. Only my own personal thoughts and observations as an actual subscriber to DC Universe. So, who cares what I think? But I hope you'll join me anyway. From deep in the heart of Texas, I am Moonjumper. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let me read your thoughts down in the comments below. All I ask is please, let's be civil. See y'all next time.